Hello, and welcome to the Global Azure Virtual 2020 event. My name is Callon Campbell, and today I'll be talking to you about exposing services with Azure's API Management. So a little bit about me. So I'm a solution architect developer. I've been a Microsoft MVP for the last 3 years. Been developing enterprise space for just over 20 years, focusing on Microsoft technologies within Azure, .NET, desktop, SQL, mobile, web. I'm a community speaker. I love speaking at events and meetups. And unfortunately this year it's a virtual event, but I'll make the best of it. Okay, so our agenda. So why API management? I'll talk about that. Then I'll start talking about Azure API Management. I'll give a good overview about how you protect your API, manage your API, do testing, mocking, and then provide a good developer portal experience for your documents. And I'll have lots of demos throughout. So when you look at applications today and services, there's a common core that is at the heart of almost every application. Whether it's mobile, Internet of Things, machine learning, cloud computing, and that is APIs. So in a world of API, every app requires an API, whether that API could be an internal API, external. Everybody wants to integrate, so integration is key. APIs are a big part when you look at mobility and IoT. And you want to have a really good customer experience, so make it very easy for customers to onboard your API, to test your API, to go through documentation. Just want to make it like really easy. So you want to provide a really good experience for that. So just want to set the context for the rest of the presentation of where an API gateway fits in. So on the far left side, you'll have an application. Developer will create an application, and on the far right side, you're going to have this service that you want to expose. So what you want to do is a gateway is going to sit in between your end user and yourself. So that's where API management will come in. So we'll be showing you how to create an API gateway and also how to create a developer portal for allowing those users to onboard your API. Okay, so what is Azure's API management? Azure's API management is a managed service for publishing, securing, analyzing, and managing your APIs. Two common use cases are for enterprise API catalog and a central place for discovery to onboard your APIs. It's often used with Azure Service Bus, Logic Apps, Event Grids, and Azure Functions. So why use Azure's API management? So it's perfect for consolidating your API. Allows you to abstract, protect, and optimize APIs. It's cloud hosted, turnkey, and fully managed. It works with APIs running in the cloud or on-prem. Allows you to publish, secure, and transform your APIs. And promotes and supports an app developer engagement. And really it provides an API governance for insights and analytics. So there are 5 available tiers at this time. A new tier that was added recently is called the consumption tier. So think of it as a serverless option. There's also a self-hosted gateway, which is currently in preview and is only available in the developer and premium tiers. On the consumption tier, there is currently no developer portal, and there are other limits, but I'll get into those details a little bit later. So focusing on the consumption tier, so unlike other Azure API management tiers, the consumption tier really focuses on serverless properties. So it will run on a shared infrastructure. It will do the scaling up and scaling down in times of no traffic. Your build per usage. So whenever someone's coming through to your API, you're going to get hit. Otherwise, you're not. It really provides a really great layer for microservice-based architectures. So instant provisioning, auto scaling, out and back to zero, has built-in high availability. I already talked about per action pricing. Some of the features that are not part of it is there's no developer portal, but that's okay because you can actually develop a portal open source, so you can download that and host it yourself. It just means it's not part of the API management itself. You also have to bring your own response cache if that's something you want to do. And there really is no usage limits because, again, it's like the serverless tier for API management. So it will just automatically scale up when needed. So you really don't need to be setting limits per se. So it's well suited for applications with serverless compute. So Azure Functions, storage account, event grid, other serverless options. Perfect for microservice-based architectures that leverages Kubernetes. It's really good for when there's a high need for spiky traffic, or you're just rarely testing something. So maybe developer QA test environments where you don't need to have this service always running, so you're not paying for it. And it's really good for test environments for your end users too. Okay, so API management, you have your API publishers, and on the far left, you have your app developers. So the API publishers, you're going to publish your app, and those apps can be hosted, again, in the cloud. It could be any cloud for that matter. It doesn't have to be Azure. It could be hosted on-prem. Your app developers are going to be creating first third-party apps, and those apps are going to want to talk to your APIs. So what Azure's API management allows you to do is provide an abstraction and security to protect your API. Provides a full lifecycle management. You can monitor and measure who's coming in, where they're coming from, and how often. And also provide a really good onboarding experience. So it's a developer portal for documentation. And also allows you to do different monetization strategies if needed. From an app developer perspective, they want to be able to easily discover what APIs you have, learn how to use them, quickly get access, try it out, see the samples, try it out in different languages, and you want to get that very easy to them. So where Azure's API management comes in is will fulfill these three boxes. So on the far right, you have the publish. So that's what Azure Portal will be doing. Inside the Azure, and then obviously you have the Azure's API Management Gateway. So that will be doing mediation. And then from the consume point of view, that's where you'll be having that's where the developer portal will come in. So I'll focus on all three of these areas and go into detailed demos of how each of them work. And these are just some of the features. So let me go into a little bit more details for them. So on the developer portal, you want to provide a first-class developer experience. So self-service API key management. So developers should be able to come in, come to your portal, sign up, and immediately get keys and start working your API. So that's all self-managed by them. You automatically provide auto-generate API catalog and documentation along with code samples. You can OAuth enable your API console for exploring APIs without writing a single line of code. You can also provide a different authentication mechanism, so you can use any of the OAuth identity providers or Azure Active Directory. Next, we have our gateway. This is where it allows you to protect and optimize your APIs. So it simplifies and optimizes requests, responses with transformation policies. You can secure your APIs with keys, or a JSON web token, and or do IP filtering. You can protect your APIs from overload and abuse with quotas or rate limits. And there's also response caching that could be added if need be to improve latency and allow you to scale better. Last, we have the Azure Portal part. So this is where it allows you to manage all your APIs in one place. So you can expose all your APIs behind a single endpoint. It allows you to get near real-time usage of who's coming to your API, what kind of performance you're getting, health analytics, do a little bit of reporting. You can automate your management using a REST API or PowerShell and Git, so you don't have to always go through the management portal to do everything I'm going to show you tonight. And you can also provision your API management and scale on demand in one or more geographical regions. What's really nice about having APIs all behind a single static IP is if you have a monolith application, it allows you to sort of start breaking down, decomposing that application to smaller microservice services per se, if that's the way you want to go. But all to the outside world still looks like a single API, whereas behind the scenes, you can break it down from an old monolith into smaller, more manageable APIs. Okay, so now I'll go into our first demo, and I'm going to create an instance. I'll import an API, and I'll start testing and debugging. Okay, so I'm going to head over to the Azure Portal, and here, if you don't already have it, you can just type in up the top API M, and you'll have API Management Services. Click on that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new API Management Service. Give it a name, APIM. I'm going to use the consumption plan just because it's easier. Demo 2. Pick a subscription, resource group, organization name, email, that's fine. So developer tier, so really you want to go with the developer tier. I'm not going to do that right now because it typically takes about 30 minutes to spin one up, but if I do the consumption tier, it's pretty much within a minute. Might be less, might be more, but around a minute. You also have the option here to enable application insights. I'm not going to do that right now. So I'm going to hit create. You can always go and add application insights afterwards. So while that's getting ready, I'm going to come through here and just get my endpoint for the API that I'm going to be consuming. So you can see at the top, it's still running. We'll come back to that. It takes about a minute. So I already have a consumption demo here. So I'm going to go into that. And that's going to show you how, actually we'll go, I want to use a developer demo. So let's go into the developer demo. So this is an API instance I've already pre-configured. Again, it takes about a half hour to set one of these up. Oh, there you go, deployment succeeded. So let's go back there. Refresh this page. So there's my APIM consumption demo 2. I'm going to come in, I'm going to collapse this. So on the far left side, so we can hear there's our gateway URL. So it's APIM-consumption-demo2. So that was the name of my, that I gave it. And then it's azure-api.net. If I go into the API section, you can see we have no APIs. So if I want to import an API, these are my options. So I can start off with a blank API if I want to start, just creating mocks, or can use an open API specification, or I can pull in a logic app or an app service or an Azure function. So I'm going to go ahead and use an open API specification. So this is a demo API that Microsoft has running. They call it the Conference API demo. So just pulling in the Swagger format. I'll bring up that web page here just so you can see what it looks like. So this is their Swagger specification. So it's just pulling all that metadata in. So it gives us the name of the API, suffix. So I'm going to call it the conference. You can see here's our base URL, and I'll be adding conference. Now what's key about that is when you add other APIs, need to spell that right. There we go. When you add in other APIs, maybe I have a conference app, maybe I have an event app, so I could have different APIs that all come in at this level in the path. So let me just go and create that. If you want to go into the full specification, And here you can spec in, what type of URL scheme you want to use. You can give it some tagging if you want, tag your APIs. You can pick which products. Products I'll get into a little bit later. And also whether or not you want to version your API. So you're not forced to version your API upfront. So I won't version it yet. And when I talk about versioning, I'll show you how that works. So let me hit the create button. So here's our API, demo conference API. And here's all the operations that I pulled in from that Swagger specification. And if I want to start testing it right away, I can just pick on get. Sorry, let me go back to all operations. So these 4 boxes you see here is how you can design your API. So when I'm on the all operations, I can configure everything about that API. If I were to click on a specific endpoint, then I can go and configure everything specifically for the endpoint. So again, I'll get to that shortly. So let's go and just test this API and make sure it works. So I'm going to click on, let's say, Get Sessions. And I will click on the Test tab. And I will hit the Send button. Okay, there you go. Took a little bit, just usually warmed up the first time. So here we have 200 OK. Here's a list of all the results that we got back for all the sessions. Now what's nice here is that I can fully come in. I can, test my endpoints that are hooked up to my backend system. I can go through tracing. So if I want to trace, what was the backend, what happened, what was the data coming in and back. I can look at the inbound, I can look at the outbound. I can see the full message. I can even go and generate a definition from the responses coming back. So that is how you can test your API. And if I run it again, it should be much faster this time. No, not much faster this time. Okay, moving on from that. Usually it's faster. So let's go into settings. So again, if you need to come in to change the settings of this API, this is what the settings tab will do. So here I'm saying I require a subscription. And this is the header name that we want to use. And the subscription key is the parameter name. I can come in and set up my security. And if I want to do diagnostics, this is where I can go back in and turn on application insights if I didn't do that from the beginning. So I tested my API. Now, what's really nice about this is I can actually come in here and start creating new mocked endpoints. So I can start generating, I can get my UI team, start working right away, because generally your UI team wants to start working against an API, and if your API team is not ready to have something published, then UI team is either doing their own mocks or they're just sitting there waiting or moving on to other things. So what's nice about Azure API Management is I can come in here and actually create a mocked endpoint. So let's create a new operation. I'm going to call it get top speaker. Resources get top speaker. I'm going to come in here under responses. I'm going to add a response, give it a 200 OK. I'm going to add a sample for content coming back. So I'm going to say it's an application, JSON, and the value is going to be name is Callon, Campbell. Okay, so that's me, my sample response coming back. So now let me hit save. So you can see here I've added this new get top speaker. And what I want to do now is I want to add a mock response for the inbound. So I'm going to click on add policy. These are different inbound policies that we can choose from. So I'm going to click on the mock response policy. And I'm going to say it's a 200 OK. I'm going to hit save. And then when I go under test for this now, there we go. So I can see that immediately when I say test this get top speaker endpoint. Again, this is not going to any backend API. And this is the sample mocked response that it's using. So you can see at the top, mocking is enabled. So I'm just totally configuring the mocked response that's coming back here. Okay, so in this demo, or set of demos, we create an API management instance. We imported our API. We've done some testing, debugging, and now mocking. So let's move on now, going back to the presentation, to how we can protect our API. So protecting our API is generally done through policy, and there's a lot of policies inside of Azure's API Management that can help you do that. So some of the policies out of the box, I'll cover a few of these in my demos. It's just rate limiting, quota enforcing. You can check the HTTP headers. You can remove HTTP headers. We can do throttling. We can handle cores. We can rewrite URLs. So URLs coming back from your backend system. If you want to rewrite them and going through Azure's API Management, so the external client sees a different URL, that can be done. We can also change the payload. So let's say you're returning JSON and customer wants XML or vice versa. You can do that. So with policies, there are different scopes. So if we set this up, go through the example. So if you, so we have a global level, so you can set a scope globally for the whole Azure API Management instance for your API that you imported. We can set it at a product level. So product, I haven't gone over product yet. Our product, think of a product is a group of APIs. So you might have, if you go back to the example I said before, we have a conference API, and let's say we also had an event API. You could group, bundle both of those two APIs as a product. So you can put a policy there, or you can put a policy specific to each API, and you can also go down to the actual operation level. And then this works for both inbound and outbound. So here in the black boxes, we'll just show you some of the policies of where you'd want to set them and how they get applied. Let's do a demo of policies. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to the developer API management instance, just because I want to be able to demo some of the policies that apply to it, which the consumption tier doesn't do, and that's really the rate limiting. So let's go to our APIM developer demo. I'm going to click on APIs. You can see here I still have my demo conference API. And if I go get top speaker, I can test that. Again, we get the same response coming back. Okay, so let's go in and do some changes. So if we look at, let's use another one. So get speakers. Let's test that one. Okay, so in the responses coming back, you'll notice here that we have these two headers, X ASP.NET version, and we got X powered by. So you might want to remove or hide some headers that are coming back. So let's add a policy to do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on the, I want to apply for the whole entire conference API. I'm going to go back to the design tab. Okay, so I'm in my API, and I'm going to want to go to the outbound processing. I'm going to add a new policy. I'm going to say set headers. And this is where I want to get rid of those two headers. So I'm going to type in or paste in here x powered by. I don't need an add a value, and what I'm going to do is delete it. And I'm also going to add in the x ASP.NET version, and I also want to delete it. So I'm going to hit save. Going to have the same value applied. Sorry, my tabs keep jumping around there. Okay, so outbound policies. Go back into the set header. So again, we had the x powered by, delete, and ASP.NET version, and delete. Save those. So you can see that they're here in our designer. And then when I go back to get speakers and I test it, we can see now the headers, those are no longer there. Okay, so that's removing headers. Now the other one was rate limiting. You might already notice I already had that in there, so my bad for already adding that. But here's how you'd want to edit it. So I add another one. So here I'm going to say limits by call rate. I already got it. So let's go look at it. So I'm going to say, number of calls 3, with a renewal period within 15 seconds. So I haven't changed anything there. And what I'm going to do is come into get speakers again, test it. So here's a response. Let's test it again. And there we go. So now we're getting a 429 response for too many requests. It will say the rate limit has been exceeded, and it will give you a time when you can try doing that again. So that's just another way of protecting your API. So now let me jump in to show you, I mentioned products earlier. So on the left here, we have products. So when you create any of the tiers except for the consumption, they'll give you these 2 products out of the gate. One's called starter, one's limited. They're just demo products. You can remove them if you want, rename them, delete them, add new ones. Again, it's just showing you a concept. So the unlimited is what it is. It allows you to come in, there are no limits, but the starter one is more to set it up so that, come in here and see how it's configured. So this one allows someone to run 5 calls a minute for a maximum of 100 calls per week. So really just allows someone to come and test your API. They're not able to abuse it or DDoS it per se. So this is how you set it up. So I'd say it's published. Requires subscription. Again, this is defaults. You can turn this off if you don't want to require subscription. You might want to say requires approval. So when someone says I want to subscribe to your API, you have to approve them. And you can also give it a subscription count limit. So this is 1. If you're creating a bunch of subscriptions for this product, you definitely want to increase that to a higher amount than 1. On the left-hand side here is APIs. So you can see that I have a bunch of APIs that I've associated with this. I have my demo conference API, and then the Echo API is a default one, so I can remove that if I want. And here under policy is where we can control how they come in. So I can send, this is the 5 by 60. And I can see my subscriptions. So I just have my administrator right now, but if I add, if other users were to subscribe to this API, I could see all those subscriptions listed here. So that's just a very general overview of products. It's really great if you want to break down your API into different tiers, like getting started tier, standard tier, professional, and enterprise call us tier. And then for each of those tiers, set up different limits. Policies of how they're hitting your API, and if the user ever needs to require more throughput, more bandwidth, they could always upgrade to a higher tier. So it's a great way for you to apply different monetization strategies. Okay, so moving on back to the presentation. So we protect our APIs with policies. So managing our API. So when I first created the first API, there was no versioning put in place. We had the option to go and add it before, but with API management, there is no one true way to apply versions. So you can either version your API or not version. There's different versioning schemes. You really, you need to define what is really a break and change, and how do you control that. Where is a good place to put version information? Do you want to version by path, by header, by query, by media type? How do you want to identify those versions? And do you want to use a date, a name, just an integer? It's truly open to how you want to do versioning. So the approach is versioning is an opt-in. So opt in when you want to. You have many different versioning schemes at your disposal. And Azure API Management will provide the means for you to inform the developers about those changes, and also provides you the control of when you want to get those changes adopted. So there's two ways doing this. So in Azure API Management, it provides revisions. This allows you as a provider to choose when to deploy small non-breaking changes. And then the other one is versions, and this is for deploying breaking changes, and allows the consumers to choose when they want to adopt and migrate from V1 to V2. So let's do a demo of that. So going back to the Azure Portal, let's go to our API. So we can see here under developer demo, I have the original. So why this one has the original, and you notice in the API consumption too, it didn't. It just has Azure's API Management. So in here, if I were to do another import and use an open API specification, so let me go back and get URL to import. So I'm going to import the same API again. We'll pretend that there's new changes in this URL. I'm going to do an update. Oh, sorry. I meant to add new version. My bad. Okay, so add new version. The name we're going to give it is called conference 2. And we're going to use the path. We're going to call it V2. So you can see here it's V2, and we don't need to do product this time. So now it will add the original. So because I didn't have a versioning set up to begin with, now when it wants to add version 2, it needs to do that. So it just calls it the original version. And this one will be version 2. So let me go back to the developer instance. So you can see here that I have my original. And the only reason I did that because I deleted the V2. So let's import, let's add a new version. So when I add a new version, I can do path, do V2 again. I create it. So there's my V2. And if I want to make changes now, so breaking change would be if I went back to the original under all operations, I can see that I have this get top speaker. I actually have a few of them. Get top speaker 2, 3. I was doing some testing. So maybe in the V2 we clean this up. So that would be a breaking change because now in version 2 we're removing APIs. So I can delete this. We'll leave the ones in the bottom. So we got rid of the 2 get top speakers at the top. And if I go back to my original, you can see that those endpoints still exist. So that would be a version. Now, if we want to do a revision, so let's go to get top speaker. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on the top tab here under revisions. And let me just collapse a couple of these windows or panes, as you can see. So here I've already got a revision 2. I added a new operation. This was for get top speaker. So let me go and add another revision. Something new, I'll call it. So now I have 3 different revisions. The current revision at this API, the V1 or the original API instance, is on this revision. We're on version 2. You can see here that's the URL. So if I wanted to try version 3, I would just pass this in as the query parameter, rev equals 3. And when I'm happy with that change, I can go and now make this the current version. So I can say public citizen, post to a public change log. So this is what will show up in the developer portal later. And I can say added new end, or added something. I don't really remember, to be honest, what I did on that one, but it was something non-breaking. Non-breaking change is really what revisions is about. So you can see now my revision 3 is that. If I ever needed to roll back, I could always come back here and say make version 2 the current one. That is an optional dialog. I don't have to. So you can see now revision 2 went back. We can roll back to revision 2. And then this allows just like dev and QA to be testing that 3rd revision. And when we're happy to it, we can promote it. Another thing you can do here is from a revision, you can actually go and create a new version from a particular revision. So we come back to this create new version dialog. I can call this V3 if I wanted. It doesn't make sense from the path I'm going because really a V3 should come from your V2. So that is versions and revisions. Very powerful stuff. Again, if you want to put in version numbers up front when you import your API, you have that choice. If you don't, then that's where the original label will come from. Okay, so another aspect of managing our API would be looking at analytics. So who's hitting our API and when they're hitting our API. So that would be under the analytics tab. Let me go here. You can see that just right now, so today, we've had 7 total requests, 6 have been successful. We've had 1 authorized. You can come in by geography, and say where they're coming from. So they're coming from the United States. You get the average response time, your average payload, data transfer that's happening. You can see which APIs are being called. So here we have all our APIs are listed. You can see all your request types. For operations, now this will just show you all the operations that have been hit, not the that have been accessed over this period of time. And if you click on one, it's not really going to dive into any specific details. This is just very high level analytics of what's happening with your API. If you want to go into more details, best thing to do is turn on application insights, and then you could dive into that aspect. That would be a completely separate topic in its own case, but I highly recommend you turn on application insights for your API management. And you can come in and show you by products, which products are hitting, which subscriptions. So you want to track which users, like from a subscription level, are hitting your system. From a user level, this is if someone comes into your developer portal and registers, you can see those users. You can also see just the requests and the payload that are coming through. The time frame, even when you say it showed me the last 15 minutes, there is a slight delay in getting those metrics. So don't be alarmed if it's not instant. But generally it does a good job of showing you what's happening within those time periods. So going back to application insights, if you want to turn that on, so remember when I create this instance, App Insights wasn't enabled yet. So just go down on the left, go down to monitoring, click on Application Insights. You can see that I have none added, so I can come in and add. I can pick from an existing instance if needed. Unfortunately, it doesn't give you the option here to go and actually create an App Insight, so you would have to jump back out and create that first. But if I wanted to, I could come in and I'll just pick this one and I'll show you what it looks like. So this is generally pretty quick. So you can see here's my insights, and if I wanted to go to that, I would just click on the go to link now, and that will take you to App Insights. There's also different where you can set up monitoring, you can set up alerts if someone comes into your API. You want to be alerted if certain thresholds are reached, metrics, logs, so really good for your monitoring. All of it really makes a lot more sense if you turn on App Insights. So again, highly recommend you do that. And you do have a very gracious free tier that comes with it. So that is managing your API from a very high level. There's lots of other settings you can come in here and do. You can give it yourself a custom domain on the left. Gateways is something that's currently in preview. You can add an external cache if you'd like, set up a virtual network. A lot of these just go a lot more in depth, sort of out of scope for this presentation, but I recommend you investigate them. The docs are really good on setting them up, and you'd probably want to. And for security, again, you have many different options. So you have OAuth 2, OpenID Connect. You can use certificates. From the developer portal. So let's get into the developer portal now. Let's go back to presentation. So developer portal, this is auto generated for you based on the Swagger Open API specification that you first imported when you created your API, imported your API. And really you have the option to go with the managed instance. So that's what I'll be showing today, and that's what you get automatically when you choose any of the tiers except for the consumption tier. So again, developer portal doesn't automatically come with the consumption tier, but you can add it yourself if you decide to go with the self-hosted option. So the developer portal is open source, so you can go to GitHub, you can download the source code and just manage it yourself. It's just raw static content, so you can even put it inside of a storage account and host it that way. So it's very fast, very cheap, or host it on-prem or host it outside of Azure. It's really up to you where you want to host it. And this comes in the premium, standard, basic, and developer tiers for API management. So to do developer documentation, you want to use, if you're in .NET World, then you want to use Swagger. And if you're in ASP.NET Core, you want to add these 3 different NuGet package. So look for swashbuckle.asp.NET Core. V5 is the current version. And then how you want to decorate your API is, I have an example piece of code here. Basically, it's just like a welcome message, hello world endpoint. This one is secure. You can ignore that, but you can basically decorate your header, put attributes above your method using the Swagger operation. So you give it a summary, just what it is, and a nice description. You can handle all the Swagger responses. So this one's going to return back 200, a 401, a 500. You can give the type of response it's going to come back. Even different exception types. So in terms of the 500, I'm going to throw an exception response. So that's a custom response that this API is doing. And you can also give examples for each of those different responses. So you can see in the 500, I'm actually going to give a special server error example of how that would come back. So let's do demo of developer portal. So developer portal, to access it, you can either come into the overview at the top, and you'll see there's these 3. So ignore the publisher portal. It's legacy, it's going away. And then you'll see there's two developer portal links. So one is the legacy older version, and then you'll see the new developer portal link. So I'm going to click on that. And the other way to get there is if you scroll down on the left, there is a developer portal section. So you can see users, identities, delegation. So delegation is when a user comes into the portal and they sign up for it. You can use the out-of-the-box experience, or you can delegate that to some other URL. So that's what the delegation is. So going back to our management, here is, it automatically loads into designer mode. So I can come in here and just change the title. So welcome to Global Azure Virtual APIs, and just click out of that. So now that's set there. The left is your navigation. So the far left, you have the different pages that are available. So you can click on any of them to edit. The next section would be your media. So here's different backgrounds, logos, that sort of thing. Next, we have layouts. So it comes with two different layouts: the homepage layout, which is what you see, and then the default layout, which is for every other page. And again, if you want to change any of these pages, just click and start changing. There's lots of different widgets you can add in. So if I want to add, this doesn't make sense at the top to do other than menus, but there's lots of widgets you can come in here and add. And again, this is all open source. So if you want to extend it and customize it and how this experience works, you totally have that option to do so. So after layouts, we have navigation. So navigation, you can just control where each of the pages will show up. We have your settings. So if I want to upload a new fav icon, this one doesn't have a fav icon right now, I can change the title. So this is Microsoft Azure API Management Developer Portal. But 2, so the title of that web page would change. Give it a description, keyword, author. Next is going to be your style. So this is your global typography for your developer portal. So you can come in here and change what all your headings will look like, what fonts they'll use, what colors you want to have. Go change the link color, hover color, so you can totally brand it how your organization wants it to be. And then lastly, we have help down here if you need to get help. But the lastly, when I say is for operational purposes, if I want to publish my website or reset the content. So first I need to save the web page. So let me hit the bottom here is to save it. I can also undo or redo my changes. So you can see the web page saved. Now to see the changes outside from an end user perspective, just take the URL you see at the top and open it up in another browser session. So here, I'll just open up in a private window. I'm going to type in the browser page. It should come up with the old heading. So you can see, welcome to Silicon Halton APIs. So let me come back here and publish the changes. So publish is being published. And if I come back, it should show up pretty quickly. Line. Okay, let me open up another browser instance. There you go. So welcome to the Global Azure Virtual APIs. Let me close this other one down. So this is the end user experience of what they'll be seeing. So they can come in here and say, let me see your products. I have a starter product, so it gives the full description of what we set up in the beginning. And if I click on starter, I can go and see, well, the starter has the demo conference API. And if I click on that, I will now see everything about my conference that I imported. I can group by tag. This one's not tagged, but if there was like tags, so by speakers, sessions, topics, maybe a session submitting, so you could group it that way. You can also go in through the design phase and go to this page and actually set the group by tag as a default. So get top speaker. So here's this new mocked API that I created. So you can see that here's the response, a sample response that would come back. If I want to try it, I can do that here. I would need to go get my authorization key, but there's that there. And I can also see all the different languages that I can use for that. So if I want to see C#, here's a sample for C#. I can just copy and paste and immediately start using this API. If I want to do it from curl, and here's curl for calling this API, or JavaScript. So all these samples are there, readily available. But now let's do the onboarding sign up and sign in experience. So if I sign up for this API, then I'm going to give myself an email. Yeah, I haven't signed up for this email already. So fill in your information. Okay. So now I'm going to go to sign in. I have to go out now. Let me just pause the recording while I get the authorization for my email. Okay, so I had to redo the email that I signed up with. I already used Callon, Campbell at Outlook.com when I created my Azure's API Management instance. So I wasn't able to create a user account using that same email. So what I've done is used my work email, and this is the response that I'm going to get back now. So it says that please confirm this person wants to access. That's just how I set that up. I will now log in using that email. Okay, so you can see now here at the top, now I have my profile and sign out. I also have a reports button. So if I go to my profile, so here's everything about me. I have not subscribed to any APIs. So let me go and do that. Go to the products. I can go to the starter and let me subscribe to it. I'll give it a new name. So I'll go with the starter API. Okay, so I have one subscription for the starter API. I can show my keys, regenerate them if need be, and then I can go and use those APIs. Use that key now when I want to hit the API. I can also go in under reports. So reports will show me my usage for the API. So over the last hour, today, 7 days, last 90 days. So it'll show me like where in the world it's coming from. And I can go in and try out the API. So let me go back to my profile. Let me get this key. Let me go to APIs. So demo conference API. Let me say get speakers. I'm going to try it out. So my subscription here is already filled in. So here's my subscription, my primary one that I want to use. I can remove it if I want. Well, I need to include it because the API requires this. And now I can hit send. So here's the response that's coming back in the developer portal. So I can see exactly, so I can test out as a user, I can test out this company's, Contoso's company's API and fully interact with it. And I can see everything about what's going on here. I can see a change log for the API. So here's those changes that I was doing for, this is the one I added today. So added something new for querying. Those are where I changed the revisions. So again, you can put very detailed notes here if need be, but really good just put a very high level of what changed. And if I want to go to reports, this should show up. Might take last hour. There is a slight delay on the analytics side for pulling this information back, but if I come back to it after, we'll see it. But you can see as a user, I can get full, I can see what products I'm hitting, what kind of failures I'm getting, what's the response time. It's really, really cool information to provide to the end user. And that's it from the developer portal. Again, this is something that can be hosted inside Azure, like API management. That's where it is now, or you can host it, self-host it. Again, you can host self-hosting inside Azure. Really good would be to download source code, compile it, and just upload that into Azure storage and run it as a website, or you can host it on-prem. You can host it in another cloud. Really, sky's the limit of where you want to do this. So signing out. So let's go back to the presentation. So in closing for my presentation, it's Azure API Management in a nutshell. So it allows you to very easily create an API facade over an existing backend services. Those services could be on-prem. They could be something that's inside of Azure, or you could very quickly use it to just mock some API endpoints to get a UI team up and running while your backend API is still being worked on. Very quickly add new capabilities. You can add response caching directly in here instead of going to your API. You can do cross-domain access. You can add in authentication, so have your API management handle the identity management, either going off to OAuth 2 or Azure Active Directory, and just pass in that information downstream to your APIs rather than having all those APIs do their own identity management. Very reliably protect your APIs, prevent misuse and abuse by using policies. You can hide certain information in the headers, so remove header information that maybe you don't want to publicly show, or add additional headers if needed. And the developer portal really provides a really engaging experience for developers to onboard your API with a very nice interactive portal. Provides very detailed documentation, samples, and really what I showed you currently is just that's all auto-generated for you just by importing your Swagger doc. So as long as you update your API behind the scenes. Now, if you're using something that's not .NET, it's a bit of a challenge there. You might, there are different libraries that you may or may not be able to use depending on your language and framework of choice. But from a .NET perspective, Swagger worked really great. And you also have the option inside Developer Portal to go and add your own custom document pages. So something that's not very technical, but maybe like a getting started, how to use the document or how to use the API. So you can have those business users put that information inside your Developer Portal. And lastly, you can gain great insights into how your API is being used through the analytics, monitoring, and logs. And if you turn on App Insights, it really lights up a whole bunch of information of what's like. You can get App Insights for the Azure API management perspective, but if you put in App Insights for your backend API, you get a lot more insight into what's going on there too. So all the dependencies that are coming in, what databases you're hitting, what external APIs you're calling, how long does it take to go between all those APIs. Really fantastic information. So a couple good learning opportunities to walk away from this from. If you're familiar with Microsoft Learn, they have a great Architect API integration in Azure course. Microsoft Learn is all free. Lots of great content in there. So if you just go in and type in Azure API Management, there's a whole bunch of modules you can start learning on. There's also a great, very high overview, but great API design book working with Azure. So you can download that ebook here. It's free. And really great design. It's up to date. And resources for my presentation. So here's some session resources. If you go to aka.ms/apimlove, lots of great information there for API management. So it mentions, talks about Microsoft Learns, a whole bunch of YouTube channel docs, samples, lots of great. It's like a portal, everything aggregated together. And my presentation, all the demos that I've done, is all on my public GitHub. Link is there. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out and let me know. I'm glad to help out. And here's my contact information. So this is a virtual event. So usually I'm used to a Q&A. I'm used to an audience looking at me and getting some feedback. So it was a bit odd to do this solo, but it was interesting, and I actually hope to do more like this. So again, please feel free to reach out and connect with me. I'd love to hear from you, engage, and help out in any way possible. Thank you. And have a great Global Azure 2020 event.